I never meant to spy on anyone. The camera was supposed to catch whoever was stealing from our lockers, nothing more. But what I discovered that night changed everything. Not just about how I saw my favorite teacher, but about how I understood the world itself. It started on a Thursday afternoon when Connor's wallet went missing. Again. This was the 5th theft in 2 weeks, and we were all getting paranoid. The administration kept promising to look into it, but nothing ever happened. That's when I remembered the tiny wireless camera my older brother had given me as a joke birthday present. He'd said it was for catching my roommates stealing my snacks in college. I never thought I'd actually use it. My name is George Morrison, and I was 17 when this all went down. Just another senior at Riverside High, counting down the days until graduation. I wasn't particularly popular or unpopular, just somewhere in the comfortable middle. Good grades, soccer team, a small group of solid friends, the kind of kid teachers liked but never really remembered after graduation. Except for Mr. Fitzgerald. He was different. Mr. Fitzgerald taught advanced literature, and he was the kind of teacher who made you actually want to read Shakespeare. Young for a teacher, maybe early 30s, with this energy that made even the most boring books come alive. He wore these vintage band t-shirts under his blazers and would reference obscure movies that only film nerds would get. Students actually looked forward to his classes. I know I did. The day I decided to set up the camera, I stayed after school pretending to work on my essay. The hallway was mostly empty by 4:30. Just the distant sound of basketball practice echoing from the gym. I found the perfect spot, tucked behind the old trophy case across from the senior lockers, angled just right to catch anyone approaching them. I synced it to my phone and went home, figuring I'd catch some freshmen trying to score lunch money. Maybe it would be anticlimactic, maybe it would be nothing. God, how I wish it had been nothing. The first few hours of footage were exactly what you'd expect. Janitor pushing his cart. A couple making out when they thought no one was looking. Mrs. Patterson wadding past with her stack of papers. Normal school stuff. I fast-forwarded through most of it, yawning. Then I saw him. Mr. Fitzgerald appeared in frame around 9 p.m. The school should have been locked by then, but there he was, walking down the hallway with purpose. Not suspicious yet. Teachers worked late all the time. But something about his movement caught my attention. He kept looking over his shoulder, checking behind him. He stopped at a locker. Not his. Teachers had their own separate area. This was a student locker, number 427. I knew because it was only 3 down from mine. He pulled out a small tool from his pocket, and within seconds, the lock clicked open. My heart started racing. Mr. Fitzgerald? Stealing from students? It didn't make sense. He drove a decent car, dressed well enough. Why would he need to steal wallets and lunch money? But he didn't take anything out. Instead, he put something in. A small package wrapped in brown paper. He placed it carefully in the back of the locker, rearranged the books to hide it, then closed the door. The whole thing took less than 30 seconds. Then he was gone, disappearing down the hallway like a ghost. I sat there staring at my phone screen, replaying the footage. What had I just witnessed? Drug dealing? That seemed too extreme, too Hollywood. But what else could it be? Locker 427 belonged to Ashley Chen, straight-A student, violin prodigy, already accepted to Yale. The least likely person to be involved in anything shady. It made even less sense than Mr. Fitzgerald being the thief. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him looking over his shoulder, that furtive glance that meant he knew he was doing something wrong. The next morning, I couldn't look at him during class. When he called on me to analyze a passage from The Great Gatsby, I fumbled through it so badly he asked if I was feeling all right. Maya noticed something was off at lunch. She always did. We'd been friends since middle school, and she could read me like one of Mr. Fitzgerald's books. I wanted to tell her. The secret felt like it was burning a hole in my chest, but something held me back. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe I should wait and see what happened next. That afternoon, I watched Ashley Chen from across the hallway. She went to her locker between 6th and 7th period, same as always. I held my breath as she opened it, but nothing happened. She grabbed a textbook and closed it without even noticing the package. Maybe she already knew it was there. Maybe this was some kind of regular thing. I set up the camera again that night, this time hidden behind a potted plant with a better angle. And again, Mr. Fitzgerald appeared around 9 p.m. Different locker this time, 311, belonging to Marcus Webb, a quiet kid from my chemistry class. Same routine. Look around, pick the lock, place a package, leave. This went on for 3 more nights. Each time a different locker, seemingly random students. By Friday, I had documented 5 separate incidents. 5 different students who had no obvious connection. Different grades, different social circles, different everything. I spent the weekend agonizing over what to do. Should I tell Principal Henderson, the police? But what if I was misunderstanding the situation? What if Mr. Fitzgerald was actually helping these students somehow? Monday morning came too fast. I'd made my decision. I would confront Ashley Chen. If anyone would have answers, it would be the first recipient. I caught her at her locker before first period. My hands were shaking as I approached her. How do you even start this conversation? Hey, Ashley, weird question, but has Mr. Fitzgerald been leaving mysterious packages in your locker? But I didn't have to say anything. As she opened her locker, I saw it, the brown paper package, sitting exactly where Mr. Fitzgerald had placed it. She picked it up casually, like she'd been expecting it. I must have made some sound because she turned to look at me. Our eyes met and I saw something flash across her face. Fear? Recognition? Before I could say anything, she slammed her locker shut and practically ran down the hallway. That's when I knew I was in over my head. I started paying closer attention to the students whose lockers had been visited. Marcus Webb suddenly had a new laptop. Sarah Martinez was wearing designer shoes I knew her family couldn't afford. Tom Bradley was bragging about concert tickets to a sold-out show. It was like Mr. Fitzgerald was some kind of twisted fairy godfather sneaking gifts into lockers at night. But why? And why these specific students? The answer came from the most unexpected source. Connor, the same Connor whose stolen wallet had started this whole thing, pulled me aside after soccer practice on Tuesday. His face was pale, and he kept checking to make sure we were alone. He knew about the camera. Somehow he'd figured out I was the one who'd set it up. But that wasn't the shocking part. Connor told me he'd been getting the packages too. For the past month, every 2 weeks, he'd find one in his locker. Always the same brown paper. Always with exactly what he needed. When his wallet was stolen, a package appeared with double the money he'd lost. When his mom got sick and he couldn't afford his soccer equipment, new cleats showed up. When he was stressed about SAT prep, a coupon for a premium online course materialized. But here's the thing. Connor had never told anyone about these problems. Not his friends, not his family, certainly not any teachers. So how did Mr. Fitzgerald know? That's when Connor showed me the note. It had come with the first package, typed on plain paper. Sometimes life isn't fair. Consider this a small attempt to balance the scales. Pay it forward when you can. No signature, no explanation, just those 2 sentences. We went through the list together. All the students I'd seen received packages. Connor knew some of their stories. Ashley Chen's father had lost his job, and she was about to drop violin lessons she'd taken since age 4. Marcus Webb's grandmother, who raised him, was struggling with medical bills. Sarah Martinez worked 2 jobs to help her family and never had anything for herself. Every single student was dealing with some hidden struggle, and somehow, Mr. Fitzgerald knew about all of them. I felt like I was losing my mind. This wasn't theft or drug dealing. It was charity. Secret, breaking and entering charity, but charity nonetheless. Part of me wanted to delete the footage and pretend I'd never seen anything. But another part, the part that had spent years looking up to Mr. Fitzgerald, needed to understand why he was doing this. The next phase of my investigation required more direct action. I started volunteering to clean Mr. Fitzgerald's classroom after school, hoping to find some clue about how he knew so much about his students' personal lives. That's where I found the notebooks. Hidden in a locked drawer, the lock was pathetically easy to pick after watching him do it so many times. There were 5 composition notebooks filled with observations about students. Not grades or academic performance, personal stuff. Detailed notes about conversations overheard, behavioral changes, signs of stress or struggle. Ashley C. mentioned father between jobs to friend, wearing same clothes more frequently, declined spring orchestra trip citing scheduling conflict, but likely financial. Marcus W. exhausted in class, likely working extra shifts. Grandmother hospitalized last month, overheard phone call. Pride preventing him from asking for help. Page after page of these observations, dating back 3 years. Hundreds of students, their private struggles cataloged with frightening accuracy. It was simultaneously the most caring and most invasive thing I'd ever seen. I was so absorbed in reading that I didn't hear the door open. Mr. Fitzgerald's voice made me jump so hard I knocked over a stack of papers. He stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Me holding the evidence of his secret surveillance, him probably calculating how much I knew. Finally, he stepped inside and closed the door behind him. He didn't look angry, just tired. Exhausted, really, like someone who'd been carrying a heavy secret for too long. He walked to his desk and sat down heavily in his chair. I waited for him to yell, to demand an explanation, to threaten me with expulsion. Instead, he asked the last question I expected. He wanted to know if I was okay, if I needed anything. Even after catching me red-handed breaking into his private files, his first instinct was to make sure I wasn't one of the students who needed help. That broke something inside me. I felt tears building behind my eyes, though I couldn't say exactly why. I told him everything. The camera, the footage, the packages, my confusion and fear and desperate need to understand. He listened without interrupting, his face growing more resigned with each word. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he told me his story. Mr. Fitzgerald had grown up in poverty. Not the romantic kind you see in movies, but the grinding, soul-crushing kind where you go to bed hungry and wear shoes until they literally fall apart. He'd made it out through education, full scholarships, and the kindness of a few teachers who'd seen his potential. When he became a teacher himself, he'd sworn to pay attention the way his teachers had. But he'd quickly learned that students were experts at hiding their struggles. They'd smile and say everything was fine while their worlds crumbled around them. So he'd started watching more carefully, listening more closely. The packages had started small. A graphing calculator left by accident on a struggling student's desk. Anonymous lunch money appearing in accounts. But it had grown into something more elaborate, more systematic. He funded it all himself, living in a tiny apartment and driving a 10-year-old car so he could afford to help more students. The breaking into lockers had started when he realized that many students were too proud to accept direct help. They needed to believe it was luck or karma or magic, anything but charity. As he talked, I understood why students loved him so much. It wasn't just that he made literature interesting. It was that he actually saw us, really saw us, in a way that most adults didn't bother to anymore. But I also understood that what he was doing was wrong. Not the helping, that was beautiful. But the spying, the breaking in, the violation of privacy and property, it came from a good place, but it was still wrong. I asked him what would happen now that I knew. Would he stop? Would he ask me to keep his secret? He smiled sadly and said the choice was mine. He wouldn't ask me to lie or cover for him. If I felt I needed to report him, he'd understand. He'd known this day would come eventually. Maybe he was even relieved. And then I left his classroom that day with the weight of the world on my shoulders. In my hands, I held the power to destroy a good man's career, to stop him from helping students who desperately needed it. But I also held the responsibility to do what was right, even if I wasn't sure what that was anymore. I didn't sleep for 3 days. I talked to Connor, who begged me not to say anything. I watched Mr. Fitzgerald in class, seeing him differently now, noticing how his eyes lingered on certain students, how he filed away every detail. I saw him slip an extra sandwich to a kid who'd forgotten lunch money, so smoothly the student didn't even notice. I thought about all the students he'd helped over the years. How many had made it to college because of a timely calculator or textbook? How many had stayed in activities that kept them off the streets because equipment magically appeared? How many had simply felt less alone because someone noticed their struggle? But I also thought about the violation, the secret surveillance, the criminal acts, however well-intentioned. Where was the line between helping and controlling? Between kindness and invasion? In the end, I made a decision that felt like a compromise, though I'm still not sure if it was the right one. I went back to Mr. Fitzgerald's classroom after school. This time, I knocked. He was grading papers, and he looked up with that same tired resignation when he saw me. I told him I wouldn't report him, but I had conditions. First, no more breaking into lockers. If he wanted to help students, it had to be legal. There were other ways: anonymous online donations, gift cards mailed to homes, working through official school channels. It might be less dramatic than midnight lockpicking, but it was sustainable. Second, he had to destroy the notebooks. The detailed surveillance had to stop. He could still pay attention, still care, but not like that. Not with written records of private conversations and personal struggles. Third, he had to let me help. Not with money, I didn't have any, but with ideas, with logistics, with keeping him from crossing lines again. I'd become his conscience, the voice that reminded him that good intentions didn't justify any means. He agreed to all of it. I think he was grateful, actually. The secret had been weighing on him too, turning him into someone he didn't want to be. He'd started out wanting to help, and had slowly become a benevolent stalker, rationalizing each step over the line. We spent the next few hours planning a better way. We researched legitimate charities that helped students. We brainstormed fundraising ideas that could create a legal pool of money for student emergencies. We talked about setting up an anonymous tip system where students could report peers who needed help without the creepy surveillance. By the time we left school that night, we had the beginnings of a real plan. It wouldn't be as immediate or dramatic as packages in lockers, but it would be legal, ethical, and sustainable. The next few weeks were strange. I'd catch Mr. Fitzgerald's eye during class, and we'd share a look of understanding. He was struggling with the change. I could see him physically stop himself from writing down observations, redirect his protective instincts into more appropriate channels. Connor and the others who'd been receiving packages were confused when they stopped appearing. Some were disappointed, others relieved. A few figured out that something had changed and gave me knowing looks, but no one said anything directly. The official Student Emergency Fund launched a month later. It was smaller than what Mr. Fitzgerald had been providing on his own, but it was legitimate. Students could apply anonymously for help with everything from lunch money to SAT fees. Local businesses started contributing. Parents got involved. It grew into something bigger than either of us had imagined. Mr. Fitzgerald still pays more attention than most teachers. He still notices when students are struggling. But now he works within the system, advocates through proper channels, helps in ways that don't require lockpicks and midnight surveillance. As for me, I learned something valuable about the complexity of good intentions. I learned that heroes and villains aren't always clearly defined, that good people can do wrong things for right reasons, and that sometimes the hardest choice isn't between right and wrong, but between two different kinds of right. I kept the camera footage, not as blackmail or evidence, but as a reminder that the people we admire are human, capable of both tremendous good and serious mistakes. A reminder that caring too much can be just as dangerous as not caring at all. a reminder that even the best teachers are still learning. Mr. Fitzgerald and I never speak about that time anymore, but sometimes when he's teaching about moral ambiguity in literature, about characters who do the wrong things for the right reasons, our eyes meet across the classroom. And in that moment, we both remember a time when life imitated art in the strangest, most uncomfortable way. I graduated last year. Mr. Fitzgerald is still teaching, still changing lives, still walking that careful line between caring and overstepping. The emergency fund has helped dozens of students. And somewhere in a deleted folder on an old phone, footage exists of a good man doing a wrong thing for all the right reasons. I never did find out who was stealing from the lockers. After everything that happened, it seemed like such a small problem. Maybe they stopped on their own, maybe they're still out there. But I learned that sometimes the crimes we uncover aren't the ones we expected, and the criminals aren't who we thought they'd be. Looking back, I'm glad I set up that camera. Not because I caught a thief or exposed a scandal, but because I learned something about the messy, complicated nature of human kindness. I learned that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear vintage band t-shirts and carry lockpicks. And sometimes the best thing a hero can do is let someone show them a better way to save the world. Mr. Fitzgerald taught me more than literature that year. He taught me about moral complexity, about the dangerous edge of good intentions, and about the courage it takes to change when someone calls you out. He taught me that being seen, really seen, by someone who cares can change your life, but that there's a right way and a wrong way to do the seeing. Most importantly, he taught me that even the best teachers, especially the best teachers, are still human. Flawed, complicated, trying their best and sometimes failing. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all. The emergency fund still operates at Riverside High. They've helped hundreds of students now, all legally, all ethically. Mr. Fitzgerald serves on the board, bringing his keen eye for student struggles to a legitimate forum. And every time I hear about another kid who got to stay in band, or go on the senior trip, or just eat lunch, I think about a teacher with a lockpick and the night everything changed. Sometimes doing the right thing means stopping someone from doing the wrong thing, even when their heart is in the right place. And sometimes the best way to honor someone's good intentions is to help them find a better path. That's the real lesson I learned from the hidden camera. Not that my favorite teacher was a criminal, but that good people need accountability, that systems exist for a reason, and that the most dangerous moment for any hero is when they decide the rules don't apply to them anymore. Mr. Fitzgerald is still my favorite teacher, but now I admire him for different reasons. Not for his midnight heroics, but for his willingness to change, to admit fault, to find a better way. That takes more courage than any lockpick in the dark. And me? I'm in college now, studying social work. I want to help people too, but I want to do it right. With transparency, accountability, and respect for the people I'm trying to help. Mr. Fitzgerald taught me that too in his way. Because that's what the best teachers do. They show us not just who to be, but who not to be. They teach us through their successes and their failures. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, they let us teach them something too. The camera that was supposed to catch a thief ended up capturing something much more complicated. A good man losing his way and finding it again. And in the end, that footage taught me more than any book in Mr. Fitzgerald's class ever could. The difference between wrong and right isn't always clear, but the difference between hiding in the darkness and stepping into the light, that's a choice we all have to make. Mr. Fitzgerald made his choice that night in his classroom, surrounded by evidence of his good intentions gone wrong, and I made mine, choosing reformation over revelation, growth over punishment. The lockers at Riverside High are safe now, not from thieves. Those probably still exist. But from the more complicated danger of being loved too much by someone who forgot that help without consent is still a violation, no matter how pure the motivation. And somewhere out there, Mr. Fitzgerald is probably grading papers, still noticing which students look tired, Which ones wear the same clothes too often? Which ones light up when they talk about dreams they can't afford? But now he knows the difference between seeing and surveilling, between helping and controlling. That's the thing about hidden cameras. They show us more than we expect to see. Sometimes they reveal crimes. Sometimes they reveal love. And sometimes, like in my case, they reveal that the two can look dangerously similar in the dark. But in the light of day, with proper channels and ethical guidelines and the simple respect of asking before helping, love looks like what it should. A teacher who cares, students who thrive, and a system that works because everyone agreed to make it work. No lockpicks required.